I don't think that there has to be a why behind storytelling. We're a storytelling species. That's what we do. It's what distinguishes us. I mean, if you try to figure out what makes us different than the other creatures that are crawling around on this planet, we're storytellers. We exchange information from one to another, and in that way, we're not just one individual trying to figure out the world. We're 100, 1,000, a million individuals all networking together through our stories to try to figure out how the world works.
Do you love science fiction and fantasy books? You've found yourself in the right dimension. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse, where each week I talk to science fiction and fantasy authors about myth, magic, and the infinite possibilities of storytelling. I'm your host, Herman Stuernagel, and I will be taking you on a journey with some of your favorite authors, helping you to get to know them and possibly uncover some new literary gems along the way. Ready to explore? Because on this show, every conversation is a doorway into a different world. Hey friends, I just wanted to hop on here real quick before I get into the interview with Edward Ashton. The first note I want to make sure that you're aware of is Ed does mention that the movie Mickey 17 is coming out in April 2024, but we did do this interview a couple months ago, so since then the release has been pushed back again. This is all because of the writer's strikes and that sort of thing happening in Hollywood. But the movie is coming out right now. It's slated for January 2025. So keep that in mind when you hear us talking about the movie release. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is just that I have an upcoming book, The Bartender Between Worlds. It is a new genre for me. It is a cozy fantasy, low stakes fantasy story. The premise is that a witch hunter has discovered that she has magic, and so she decides that she wants to retire from her command post as a witch hunter and become a bartender. It's a fun little story. Be sure to check it out. It is on Amazon right now for pre-order, or you can also pre-order the ebook and the paperback or hardcover copies on my website, hermanstuernagel.com. I am also running a Kickstarter campaign for this project. It will be a deluxe illustrated edition of the book. My wonderful wife, Nettie, has done up illustrations for the book. They look amazing. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen them already. If not, go check them out. They are incredible. I've got one posted up on Instagram. The rest I'll be revealing later this month. And the cover reveal for the standard edition will also be coming up in April. So be sure to check that out. Also, if I can ask for your help for the channel, please do like, subscribe, rate and review the podcast wherever you happen to be listening. It really helps me out a ton and helps me to reach more listeners like you that enjoy hearing interviews from other fantasy and sci-fi authors. I am still a relatively new channel, so any little bit like that helps, especially on YouTube. YouTube really appreciates those likes and subscribes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the interview. So welcome back once again to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. I am really excited today to have a very special guest, Edward Ashton. Edward you might be familiar with the Mickey 7 is his most popular book. He has a few other books and a new one coming out on the way. And I'm really excited to have you here, Ed. Welcome here.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, well, thank you. Why don't you get us started here and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey?
So my name's Ed Ashton. Again, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I've been a writer for as long as I can remember. I've been a writer for as long as I've been alive, probably, or at least a storyteller for as long as I've been alive. My parents moved house a few years ago, and they gave me a folder of stories that I had written on loose leaf notebook paper when I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
That's awesome.
Really dark stuff, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a dark kid. I don't know. It was kind of creepy, but I sold my first professional piece when I was 19 to the newsletter of an Italian sausage company. I still consider that to be one of my best sales. They paid me in pizza.
Nice.
Which I thought was fantastic. I later learned that you can exchange cash for goods and services. And so getting paid in money allows you to get even more pizza and other things as well. So I moved on to cash sales eventually. I took a little bit of a hiatus after my first daughter was born. I couldn't justify spending hours a day tapping away on a keyboard when I had these little people who wanted to play with me and thought I was cool. So
Right.
that lasted for 13 years. And then I learned, and this was a big surprise to me, that apparently teenagers don't think it's the coolest thing in the world to hang out with their dad all day.
Right.
And so I found myself with a little bit of free time again. So I started playing Civilization, and that lasted for about 6 months before my wife threatened to divorce me if I didn't stop playing Civilization and start doing something productive with my time. And that's when I picked up writing again.
Cool.
And 6 months after that, I had finished 3 Days in April, which was published by HarperCollins in 2015, and it's sort of been an upward ramp from there.
Very cool. So you've been published then published in novel format for the last 10 years or so then?
3 Days in April came out in 2015. So yeah, eight years, 9 years, something like that.
Wonderful. And so what's the why in your writing? What's your motivation behind storytelling?
I mean, first of all, I'm going to just sort of gently push back on the premise of the question because I don't think that there has to be a why behind storytelling. We're a storytelling species. That's what we do. It's what distinguishes us. I mean, if you try to pick out what makes us different than the other creatures that are crawling around on this planet, well, we're intelligent. Yeah, so are elephants, so are dolphins. They're really smart. We're able to manipulate things. We have thumbs. Koalas have 2 thumbs, right? So there are 2 thumbs on each hand. So if that were a big deal, they'd be ruling the planet. We're storytellers. We exchange information from one to another, and in that way, we're not just one individual trying to figure out the world. We're 100, 1,000, a million individuals all networking together through our stories to try to figure out how the world works.
Yeah.
And so that's been a part of me since I was, like I said, since I was a kid. I mean, not just writing. I mean, when I was 12 or 13 years old, a group of friends and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I was the dungeon master. I didn't know how to play Dungeons. I still have no idea how Dungeons and Dragons really works. We didn't play Dungeons and Dragons. I told them stories while they occasionally randomly rolled dice every once in a while. And I paid no attention to what the dice said, and I just told them whatever story I wanted to tell them. So that it's a part of me. I feel like storytelling is a part of most of us.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that answer. It's so true. And definitely it takes a certain amount of determination and dedication to sit behind a keyboard all day and put that story down into words. But you're absolutely right. There's stories in all of us, and that's what makes us who we are.
I would actually push back a little on that too, because it's a myth that you have to sit behind the keyboard all day, every day to write anything, to write short stories, to write a novel. My first novel was 3 Days in April, was basically written over lunch at work while I was holding a sandwich in one hand in 15 and 20-minute chunks. You don't need to be able to sit in a cone of silence for 8 hours a day to write a novel. You can write, half an hour. You can write 300, 400 words, no problem. And if you do that consistently, day after day after day, those words accrete, and the next thing you know, you've got a 100,000 word novel.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so, what does your process look like now? Are you still hammering away over your lunch break, or does your process look a little different now?
Lunch break and evenings, and I refer to it as writing in the interstices. I sort of write in the interstices of my life. I'm a cancer researcher by trade, so that takes some of my attention. It's a relatively demanding job. I've got a family. I've got dogs. I've got a cat. They all like me. They like to play with me sometimes. So I can't block out 4 hours to write. I've never been able to, and I don't anticipate ever being able to do that, unless my life changed drastically, and probably for the worse. So I kind of hope that doesn't happen. When I have 20 minutes free, you put dinner in the oven, you've got 25 minutes until it comes back out. That's 200 words. I've got an hour after work, and we're going to go for a walk later. I can get in 300-400 words in that time. And like I said, I'm just really sort of persistent and consistent about it. I make sure I write every day, and that may be 200 words one day, maybe 1,000 words on a really good day. I mean, I see people on social media talking about, oh, I did a 20,000 word day or something. That seems insane to me. That
Yeah.
seems like literally deranged to me. I have never once in my life written more than 1,500 words in a day. And I've got 4 published novels and 2 more on the way. So
Yeah, right.
you don't have to do it that way. You can.
Yeah.
Some people do. We all have our own process, but it's
Right.
not required for you to dedicate your life to this.
Yeah, well, I commend your focus for being able to sit down for a 20-minute block and focus in that small of a time frame. I find sometimes it takes me 20 minutes just to get my focus to where I need it to be in order to start putting words down.
I will say that is, if we talk about, we all have our superpowers, right? If I have a superpower, that's it. I'm able to switch focus really rapidly with no drop time in between, and I'm able to really focus in on something to the complete exclusion of everything going on around me. So I can have chaos going around me and honestly not even be aware of it. I mean, my wife sometimes gets frustrated because she'll have a conversation with me and I will have no memory of having had that conversation because I was doing something else, and like some part of my brain, like down in my brain stem, was actually working my mouth to respond to her, but none of it was getting recorded. Because I was, the stuff up here was doing something else that I thought was more important.
So what other authors have inspired you?
That's a really hard question to answer. I've been reading sort of voraciously since I was 5 years old. I when I was younger, really admired and still do admire people like Kurt Vonnegut. I used to really admire Richard Ford. I was really into minimalist short story authors for a long time. I have moved on since then to a lot more science fiction focused stuff, particularly in the last 10 years or so. I'm a huge fan of David Brin, and Leckie, giant fan of Ann Leckie. John Scalzi is a big inspiration for me. But really, I'm reading something different every week. I went on a big Adrian Tchaikovsky kick, for instance, about 6 months ago. I think I read about eight or nine of his books, and he's got like 800 more. So there's still plenty more out there. And there's an old saying that dinner tastes like whatever is sitting next to in the freezer, and I think that applies really well to writers. You pick up little bits and tone from whoever you happen to be reading at the time, and
Right.
as long as you keep a variety in who you're reading, it doesn't sound like you're trying to imitate anyone too badly, because everything gets so jumbled and mixed up that it becomes your own voice at some point.
Yeah, right. Very true. Cool. So let's talk about your work a little bit. I do want to talk about your upcoming book, but I would like to talk first a little bit about Mickey 7, just because there is a movie coming out in the near future based on it. So can you just briefly tell us a bit about Mickey 7 and the premise of that book?
Sure. The short line for Mickey 7 is that it's a story of a man whose job is to die. Mickey 7 is a book. It's set about 1,000 years in the future. And the premise is that we've developed the technology to record a human mind and to store a human mind, your memories, your hopes, your fears, everything. And also to basically use like a bioprinter, 3D printer to produce sort of an empty body. And you put those two things together and you have a sort of an immortality. And that's who Mickey is. Mickey is an expendable on a mission to colonize what turns out to be an almost uninhabitable planet. And the expendable is a person whose job is to do everything that nobody else wants to do, the things that are dangerous to suicidal, which, as it turns out, on a mission like this, there's an awful lot of. And every time he's killed, they print him out a new body, they download his recorded memories, and to everyone else, it's sort of no harm, no foul. Like, he's right back, he looks just the same as he did yesterday, he's fine. But it's not fine for him because he has to die all those times, and he remembers those deaths, and he has this increasing load of trauma that's piled up on him from these deaths, these experiences. And he's realized by the beginning of the book, the reason it's called Mickey 7 is because he's the 7th iteration. He's died 6 times already. He's realized that signing on for this gig was not the best idea, not his best career move, but it's the one job in the world that you can never escape. You can't even die to get out of it. And
Right.
so that's the dilemma he faces at the beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was it's quite an enjoyable title, and for such a dark premise, it was really a fun read. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But it was signed on by Warner Brothers as a movie. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, that's the part that makes me wonder from time to time if I'm in fact in an intensive care unit hooked up to a morphine drip and they're about 3 seconds from pulling the plug on me, and this is all a sort of a last delusion. Warner Brothers optioned that book before we even had a publication contract, and that is not ordinarily how this thing goes. I mean, ordinarily you have a book, it gets published, it becomes a bestseller, and then a movie studio gets interested, they sign it. John Scalzi, for instance, his probably most famous book, Old Man's War, won every award there was to win. It's been a bestseller for years. That's been optioned 4 different times by 4 different studios and never actually got produced.
Right.
This manuscript that I written, and I was at the time a completely obscure author. I mean, I had 2 published novels, but they were neither one of them really broke out. They were pretty small. And my agent somehow got the manuscript into the hands of Brad Pitt, Dee Dee Gardner, and Jeremy Kleiner at Plan B Productions. And they, for whatever reason, they liked it. And they convinced their friends at Warner Brothers to option it. And then, of course, if you talk to authors a lot, you'll constantly hear the refrain of, oh yeah, like 3 of my books have been optioned. I mean, obviously none of them ever got made. That's always the follow-on to that. I mean, like Scalzi, Scalzi's probably the most famous science fiction writer in the world right now. And none of his books, he's had several of them optioned, none of them gotten made. And so my assumption at the time was, and what everyone told me, take the check, cash it, spend it, and don't ever expect to see anything else from it, because that's just how this goes. Mm-hmm. And then they signed on Bong Joon-ho to direct, and then they signed on Robert Pattinson to star in the film, and it occurred to me they're actually going to do this. And they did it. I was there. I got to go to Leavesden Studios outside London and watch them do the filming.
Nice.
It actually did happen. I can tell you from firsthand experience, this did occur. And it's scheduled to come now. It was scheduled for release on March 29th. I will tell you that has been moved. That was just announced a couple of days ago, although I knew 3 months ago that was going to move. Due to the writer's strike, they moved Dune from November to March. Also Warner Brothers film, and there was no way Warner Brothers was releasing 200 million plus science fiction epics in the same month. So
that makes sense.
So Mickey 17 is getting pushed back a little bit.
Okay. And did you have any say in the creation of the film at all?
Say is a strong word. I had when Director Bong signed on to the project, I had about a 2-hour Skype call with him where we talked about the film. He had amazingly detailed questions. He wanted to know everything about sort of how I envisioned this world and what it was like. And he told me, you have to understand, you wrote a 350-page novel. I'm writing a 120-page script. There's a lot of stuff that's going to have to come out. But I want you to tell me the one thing that you feel is the emotional heart of this book, the one thing that must be in there, and I will promise you it will be in there. And He did not have to do that at all. That was, in no way was that an obligation. I thought about it for about 5 seconds, and I said, Chapter 19. Chapter 19 has to be in there. And if you've read the book, you probably know why I said that. And he said, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I cried when I read that chapter. That was going to be in anyway. And I said, can I pick another one? And he said, no. And that was it. That was that was the extent of my input into the movie. But I've read the script. It is absolutely a banger. It's going to be a fantastic movie. The test screenings have gone over really well. Everybody seems to like it. So I'm really excited to see it on the screen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and exciting. And what an exciting opportunity. And like you said, like I've heard so many stories of options getting picked up and nothing happening. And I imagine getting that phone call that cast and crew and everything had been picked out was quite an adventure for you.
Well, I was sitting at my breakfast table, and my phone dinged, and it was a text from my agent, and it was just a blank text with a link, and it said, "Click this." I'm like, well, this is a phishing attack, obviously, right?
Right.
Clearly, I'm not going to click that.
They've been hacked, yeah.
But it was from him, so all right. So I clicked on it, and my wife was sitting across the table from me, and she immediately looked at me and said, "Oh my God, who died?" Because my face just fell and went completely white, apparently, like even whiter than it usually is. And it's like, no, it's a good thing. And it was a deadline announcement that they were, the Bong was on the project and they were moving forward with it. So
that's so cool.
Absolutely astonishing.
Right on. Yeah, awesome. So I want to talk a bit about your next book because it is coming out here fairly soon. The title is Mal Goes to War. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what it's all about?
Yeah, Mal Goes to War is a bit of a departure from my last two books. It is set in the near future, sort of here in the States. It's nominally set around 2065, and the main character, the protagonist Mal, is an artificial intelligence. He's sort of the classic idea of the AI who lives in the networks, right? Lives in the underbelly of our infrastructure, sort of siphoning resources off from humanity. And at the beginning of the book, humanity is in the middle of a sort of convulsive war between the federal government, who has supported the sort of modification and augmentation of humans, genetic modifications, and sort of mechanical augmentations, and a group of people who refer to themselves as the humanists, who believe that this is all wrong and that we're losing humanity. To Mal, this looks like two rival anthills fighting. He has no real interest in it, but he does have interest in some of the stuff these guys are leaving behind. And so he dips into a battlefield. He drops down because the electronics are things that he can sort of inhabit, and he drops into the body of a dead cyborg mercenary to take a look around. And when he does this, he loses contact with the nets. The rebels destroy the communication tower that he had been using to get around, and so he's stuck. And he's stuck with the responsibility that this mercenary died doing, which is protecting a little girl who herself is modified, and the humanists are not merciful to the modified when they catch them. And so if she's caught, she'll be killed in a really bad way. And so he finds himself very reluctantly with the responsibility of getting her across enemy lines to safety. And that's really where the book takes off.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Very interesting. And so what was the inspiration behind the story?
I've always had an interest in non-human intelligence, other sorts of minds. One of the reasons I was on that Adrian Tchaikovsky kick is because nobody does non-human minds like Adrian Tchaikovsky. The Children of Time series, with the sort of uplifted spiders and the octopuses and the ravens. He's just brilliant at seeing how a different sort of mind would see the world, and how it would see the world in a different way, and really completely process and perceive the world in a different way than we do. And that's something I wanted to try to do in this book. With this artificial intelligence. He's a little closer to humans probably than Tchaikovsky's creations, because Mal is sort of backstory is that he began as a personality emulator. So he sort of understands humans a little better maybe than those creatures, but nonetheless, he has a completely different perspective on the world. And I wanted to explore how you could sort of be a fish out of water in that way, trying to sort of fit in with humans around, because in the course of the book, he has to try to almost pretend to be human for part of the time to try to fit in and not be discovered and killed. And it's surprisingly difficult for him. He finds that he doesn't know as much about us as he thought he did.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And how much of a commentary on on us as humans is that as well? Because it definitely sounds like there's a deeper level of that there.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier to dig at the foibles of a society or a species if you're looking at it from the outside. And he has a perspective on us that it's hard for us to have on ourselves, because humanity is sort of the water that we swim in, and he's outside and is able to look in and sort of see how ridiculous we are in a lot of ways. And he's not he's not shy about pointing out when the people around him are behaving in ridiculous ways. He doesn't have a lot of tact.
Okay, makes sense. And how much have recent developments in AI played a part in the story and in its creation?
The true answer to that is not at all. I started working on this book in 2016 when ChatGPT was not even a gleam in some engineer's eye. The timing of the book's release is fortuitous because people are thinking about AI right now, in a very serious way, and I think that's why it's gotten a little bit of the buzz that it's gotten so far. But that's, like I said, that's entirely been fortuitous. That's been good luck on my part.
Right. Yeah. And that's worked out well then. I think that, I kind of suspected that just with, I kind of realized how these release schedules go and, submitting and that sort of thing. And, things have changed so quickly in that landscape that's not surprising, but hopefully that works out well for you. So can you tell us? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll note also that, the sort of AI that Mal is in the book really has nothing to do with what like ChatGPT provides. ChatGPT is not, and never will be the technology that goes behind something like ChatGPT, which I've done a bit of work with. I do some AI programming in my day job. That kind of AI, in my opinion, has no potential to ever be sort of self-aware and self-directing the way that the sort of AIs that we imagine are. It would be not. It's not just an outgrowth of what we currently have. It would be a completely different technology.
Makes sense. Yeah, definitely. It's just a learning algorithm.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the world of the story then, and what's brought the world to the point where they're at?
Yeah. So the background is that, and I feel like this is not an unlikely outcome that we wind up in this sort of a mess. But in this world, it has become possible to modify genetically children to give them advantages, to make them stronger, smarter, taller, prettier. But of course, that sort of privilege is only available to the rich.
Right.
It's only available to the wealthy. Also, human-machine interfaces has progressed pretty well. You can get implants that sort of act like a phone built into your head for communication. And video viewing. One of the characters has what his colleagues sort of disparagingly refer to as a porno rig built into his head, where he can sort of privately download video and view it inside his head immersively. Also, of course, only available to the rich. And as these advantages, because this gives you cognitive advantages, it gives you all sorts of advantages. The wealthy begin to separate out even more and more and more from the rest of the population in terms of what they can achieve, how much more wealth they can accumulate, and this causes huge social tensions. And at the beginning of the story, those tensions have burst out into open warfare, with the sort of have-nots rebelling against the government and the elites who have kept sort of all of these advantages to themselves. Now, I'm kind of making it sound like the rebels are the good guys. There's not. One of the points I try to make in this book is that in almost any conflict, there probably isn't a good guy. There's very rarely a virtuous side in any serious armed conflict, and that is definitely true here. Mao starts out with a pox on both your houses sort of view, and that doesn't change throughout the
Mm.
course. He just he just wants for he and his friends to get out of this alive. There's not really a good guy on either side of this war.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Those are some of my favorite types of stories where you're kind of looking at the outside and the kind of what's happening on both sides. I really do enjoy that. Yeah. And so what's your process when you're creating a world like this? Are you basing it on current events? Are you basing it just, where does that come from, and how does that look as you're building it out?
No, I try not to get too wrapped up in current events, or so, because again, you're talking about the length of the production cycle. If I start writing about something that's current in everybody's minds when I'm writing, they will have completely forgotten about it by the time the book comes out 6 years
Mhm.
later.
Yeah.
It's just the timelines are so long that's you can't chase those sort of trends. It's just a losing game. So, I'm the sort of person who just likes to tell people neat stuff. Like I have a friend that I have lunch with every couple of weeks. I'm actually having lunch with her tomorrow. And like every time we get together, she's like, "Okay, what do you got for me today?" And I was like, here's like a neat thing that I learned, and so that's kind of what I do with my books. Like there's some neat
Cool.
thing I want to talk about. In Mickey 7, it was the teletransport paradox. That's something that I have always thought was absolutely fascinating. The question of whether if you were able to upload your brain into a new body, if you were able to sort of like people at Google are trying to do right now, and Elon Musk is trying to do right now. If you could sort of upload your consciousness, would that really be you, or would that just be a totally different person?
Yeah. Right.
That question has always fascinated me, and so I wrote a book about it to explore those questions. And I've done the same thing with this book, except it's more about morality and obligation, and sort of who gets to be human and who owes what to who. What obligations do we have to each other in a time of danger, in a time of conflict?
Right. Yeah. Okay. And how about the characters in your book? Without having been able to read it because it's not out yet. Do you have a favorite character, and what made them special?
I mean, obviously my protagonist is has a special place in my heart. But if you're looking beyond that, the little girl that he is sort of tasked with protecting, her name is Kaylee. I put a lot of heart into her as well. I have she is as it turns out, maybe doesn't need to be protected, and she winds up doing more of the protecting than being protected as you go on, because she looks like a 5-year-old girl, but she is actually 18 years old because of her genetic modifications.
Mm.
She's also extremely fast and extremely strong because of her genetic modifications. And it turns out she's a lot more dangerous than Cyborg Mal is on his best day. And I have 3 daughters of my own who I have raised to be fierce women, and I think I've done a good job with that, and I put a lot of them into her as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And it's usually a side character that ends up being a writer's favorite. I find you have a little bit more, I think, room to play around with them a little bit more.
Very
in a
true.
lot of ways. Yeah. So humor seems to play a big part in your writing, definitely in Mickey 7, and from the blurb, I get the impression that Mel Goes to War is the same way. Some of the topics that you deal with are a bit darker. How do you approach them in a way that is both humorous while also still maintaining the gravity of the topics?
That's one of the toughest things. The way that I write, I'm not intending to be a comic author. I don't want to be like Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett, who are just writing comedies. But on the other hand, you're right that humor infuses all of my work, and I feel that's important. There's a lot of, if you read what's on the shelves at the bookstores today, there's a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just relentlessly grim stuff. And to me, that's not fun to read. It's just not fun. And like you're right, I touch on some dark themes, but I don't feel that the world is a dark place fundamentally. I feel that the world is a light place, and I want to bring that into my writing. Um, I mean, also that part of that is just my voice. That's kind of how I talk to my friends and to my family as well.
Right.
The trick is to make sure that I'm not using humor where it's emotionally inappropriate for the scene. So, for instance, there's a scene in Mickey 7 where there's just been sort of a battle outside the dome. A couple of people have been killed. Birdo has just swooped in and saved Mickey and Kat from like almost being killed. And in the first draft of the book, they're wisecracking in the shuttle as they're being pulled out of here, and they're making jokes. And I read back through it, and I'm like, that's wrong. They've just been traumatized. They can't do that. And I had to completely rewrite that scene. So it's really often it's a matter of dialing it back in the revision process from where it is, where it's like all sort of quippiness in the first draft, and then I have to look at what the emotional balance of each individual scene is and say, like, is that appropriate or is it not appropriate? And a lot of times the answer is no.
So it's not even that you're trying to insert it appropriately into the scene. You're pulling back when it's not appropriate.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, and I get the sense that is your voice, even from some of your tweets and that sort of thing as well. Your tweets crack me up a lot of the time. So
I appreciate that. I do try.
Yeah. So what can readers expect from you next? Is there anything that you can share that you're working on or that's coming down the pipeline after Mal Goes to War comes out?
I actually just turned my next book into my agent around the first of the year. So that should be off to my publisher shortly, assuming that he doesn't read it and think it's terrible, which I hope that he won't. Right. So that this is another standalone book. It's not related to any of my previous work. It's something more along the lines maybe of Mickey 7 in that it's sort of set further in the future. But not in any way related in terms of characters or scene or setting or anything else like that. Beyond that, this is the last book in my current contract with my publisher. So I have prepared pitches for 6 new projects that I might want to work on, and I'm going to present those to my agent, who will present them to my publisher, and he will hopefully like one or more of them and let me know where we want to go from here. So that's the next thing.
Excellent. Well,
so it's exciting. A little up in the air from my perspective. I don't really know what my next thing to write is.
Right. Just wait and see what comes back.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So this is the greatest podcast in the multiverse, and so that means this is the time for my favorite question. Can you tell me how in a parallel universe another decision may have affected another version of your life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because the cascade of circumstances that has led me to where I am right now has been so absurd that I'm highly confident that across the multiverse, 99.9% of the world, I'm a simple syrup farmer and just like draining maple trees and turning them into sugar. That seems pretty clear. I mean, honestly, 99% of those multiverses, I'm probably dead. I had a rough first few years growing up.
Oh, really?
It's, I once spent a very memorable 30 seconds dangling by these 3 fingers from a root jutting out of a cliff wall about 80 feet above rocks. I used to free solo. I used to do free solo rock climbing.
Yeah. Wow.
So that the fact that I'm even here alive is kind of a rarity, and the fact that even beyond that, I've had the great fortune that I've had in terms of, like I said, a completely unpublished manuscript from an obscure author shows up on Brad Pitt's desk, and he actually opens it and thinks it's neat. I mean, that's so improbable as to almost strain credulity, honestly. I mean, if I put that in one of my books, no one would publish it because they'd think it was ridiculous. and then to get, Bong Joon-ho, the man just won all, like all the Oscars there are to win in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and he's looking for his next project, and everyone in the world is besieging him with proposals for what is the next thing he should work on.
Right.
And he decides this, like my book, this unpublished manuscript from someone no one has ever heard of. Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going to make. That's going to be my blank check movie. The one
Right.
thing after following up after winning 7 Oscars, I'm going to do that. What are the odds?
That's so incredible.
It's a zillion to one. I mean, it's like I said, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Right.
So, you want to know what I'm doing in the rest of the multiverse? Like I said, I'm making maple syrup is what I'm doing. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see the movie. The one thing I didn't ask you, is there, and I'm not sure if you know, but is there a reason why they went with 17 instead of 7 on the movie title?
Director Bong thought that I was insufficiently murderous. Killing Mickey is a lot of fun. I'm sure it's going to make a nice murder montage that he's going to put together, and you can never have too many dramatic deaths.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you once again for joining me, Ed. Can you let our listeners know where they can find you and where they can find your books?
You should be able to find my books pretty much anywhere that you buy books. My daughter just saw them on the shelf at the bookstore at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. So if you're passing through there, maybe grab a couple. If you want to sort of get my full bibliography, as well as like all my short stories and everything else, my website is edwardashton.com. So if you just sort of jump in there, there's like 40 short stories linked there for free. You can read whatever you want, and also buy links for the books.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again, and I hope I get to chat with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. As well, you can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get early access to the show, as well as submit your questions for my upcoming guests. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.